Sultanate stood before the ancient Orkhon inscriptions, the weathered stones rising from the heart of Asia like memories carved into the earth itself. Above her stretched the endless vault of the steppe sky, that infinite blue her ancestors had worshipped for 1,000 years. Nearby, 4 shamans circled in ritual formation, chanting sacred verses to honor Tengri, the eternal sky. Their master, the venerable Sem, guided each rhythm with a voice as steady as the turning seasons. But Sultanate's thoughts wandered far beyond the ceremony. Somewhere on the western steppes, her cousin Engin was leading his tribe on a perilous migration toward unknown lands. Her sister Bilge rode alone toward the distant Black Sea, racing against time and fate. Sultanate lifted her drum, closed her eyes, and offered a prayer to the sky above, pleading for guidance, for protection, for a safe home where her wandering kin might finally rest. This fictional scene reflects a deeper truth. For the ancient Turkic and Mongolic peoples, Tengrism was never merely a belief system. It was the pulse of their world, the lens through which they understood nature, authority, life, and death. Too often dismissed as a primitive steppe religion, Tengrism was in reality a sophisticated spiritual philosophy that shaped empires spanning continents. Its influence stretched from the early Turks through the great Mongol conquests and into the medieval age. Welcome to our exploration of Tengrism, the ancient faith of the steppe, and the essential role it played in the early history of Turkic peoples. Tracing the roots of Tengrism is like following hoofprints across a windswept plain, always half erased, always shifting beneath the dust of centuries. Much of what we know comes from later observers rather than the early nomads themselves. Before the 8th century, written records among Turkic and Mongolic peoples were rare, and their sacred traditions passed through voice alone. The most detailed accounts emerged from the Mongol Empire in the 13th century, when literate civilizations from China to Persia wrote extensively about the Mongol conquerors. Yet the religion practiced under Genghis Khan was not identical to the faith followed centuries earlier. Beliefs and rituals evolved across time, shaped by migration, conquest, and contact with neighboring cultures. Modern scholars often reduce Tengrism to shamanism, but this oversimplifies reality. Archaeological discoveries across Kazakhstan and Siberia reveal that spiritual practices were performed not only by ritual specialists, but by ordinary tribe members. Shamans served as healers and intermediaries, but they were never the sole guardians of the faith. When Tengrist rulers built empires, the primary connection between heaven and earth became the Khan himself. The earliest concrete evidence of Tengrism comes from the Orkhon inscriptions discovered in Mongolia. Carved into stone around 732 CE, these monuments recount the divine authority of early Turkic rulers. In one powerful passage, Bilge Kaghan describes his ancestors as chosen by heaven itself. The inscription declares that when the blue sky above and the dark earth below were created, between them were formed the sons of men. Over these sons, the forefathers Buman Kaghan and Istami Kaghan established themselves as rulers, bringing order to the Turks who had no lord and no tribal organization. Through these ancient words, a profound truth emerges. Tengri was not simply a god to be worshipped. He was the source of political legitimacy. A Kaghan ruled because the sky allowed it. His victories reflected divine favor, and his failures signaled heaven's displeasure. This concept of celestial mandate echoed through later dynasties long after many had converted to other faiths. Rulers adopted titles like Tengri Kaghan, meaning heavenly Kaghan, fusing political authority with cosmic sanction. Archaeological evidence reveals glimpses of vibrant spiritual life across the ancient steppes. Excavations have uncovered small figurines used in family rituals connected to fertility and protection of sacred lands. Tengrism was cosmologically rich and deeply interwoven with everyday existence, touching everything from hunting and herding to warfare and diplomacy. At the center of the Tengrist worldview stands Kekek Tengri, the blue sky god, supreme celestial force, guardian of fate, and ultimate judge of human affairs. Historians have interpreted Tengri variously as the chief deity within a larger pantheon, as the personification of the sky itself, or as a near monotheistic figure comparable to Ahura Mazda or the god of Abrahamic traditions. Medieval Muslim and Christian writers emphasized monotheistic interpretations, attempting to relate Tengrism to their own beliefs. Tengri was accompanied by other divine beings. Ume presided over fertility and motherhood. In Mongolic belief, Chagayik served as the Earth Mother. The faith also encompassed spirits including Eukhanid, the Water Mother, Ade, the Fire Spirit, and Desud Tengri, the Mounted God of War, revered even after the spread of Buddhism. Among the most enduring elements of Tengrist tradition is the myth of the blue wolf. The best-known version begins on a battlefield drenched in silence. Amid the wreckage, a lone boy survives, gravely wounded but breathing. As darkness settles, a great she-wolf named Asena discovers him. She nurses him back to health and eventually bears his children, 10 beings neither entirely wolf nor entirely human. These descendants become the founders of the GKTRK tribes that would rule the Eurasian steppe from the 6th to the 8th century. This myth served as a political statement, a divine genealogy validating the authority of GKTRK ruling clans. If their bloodline flowed from the union of man and sacred wolf, their right to lead was inscribed into the cosmos itself. Centuries later, Genghis Khan invoked similar imagery, tracing his lineage to the mythical blue wolf Kakevino and a mystical fallow doe named Gua Marl, presenting his rise as destiny ordained by Tengri. For both Turks and Mongols, ancestor veneration was woven into daily life. Families maintained shrines where offerings were made to those who came before. Among ruling dynasties, ancestors were elevated to divine status. A young man by the Volga might seek courage from his grandfather's spirit. A warrior preparing for battle might invoke fallen heroes. Ancestors watched over their descendants, guiding them toward wisdom and fortune. Tengrism linked every living person to an unbroken chain of spirits, stretching back to the dawn of their people. As the second millennium began, Tengrism underwent dramatic transformations shaped by the Mongol Empire, the greatest land empire the world had ever seen. Stretching from Siberian forests to Persian deserts, from European gates to Chinese shores, the empire reshaped everything it touched. Like the GK before him, Genghis Khan presented his authority as a gift from Tengri. But on this unprecedented scale, Tengrism evolved into imperial ideology. Scholars argue that during the Mongol era, Tengrism transformed into universal doctrine justifying world rule. Tengri was no longer merely a sky deity watching over steppes. He was portrayed as master of the entire world, with the Khan as his earthly representative. In some proclamations, the Khan appeared as an incarnation of Tengri himself. What made Mongol Tengrism remarkable was its flexibility. Despite Tengri's elevation as universal ruler, the Mongol elite practiced extraordinary religious tolerance. The Kyriads followed Assyrian Christianity. Many nobles embraced Tibetan Buddhism, Nestorian Christianity, or Islam through intermarriage and alliance. In China under the Yuan dynasty, Tengrism blended with Buddhist notions of the Chakravartin, the universal monarch. Kublai Khan sponsored Tibetan lamas while invoking eternal Tengri as the source of his authority. Mongol rulers invoked Tengri in diplomatic correspondence. In Yar Salil, Gyo Khan commanded Pope Innocent IV to submit, opening with invocations to eternal Tengri. In Yar Liar Kulegu, Khan wrote to King Louis IX claiming he fought under Tengri's mandate, translated as the living God. To Christians, Tengri could appear monotheistic. To Buddhists, he harmonized with cosmic kingship. To Muslims, he represented divine legitimacy. This adaptability made Tengrism perfect ideological foundation for multinational empire. But the 13th century also marked profound change. As Mongol and Turkic peoples encountered global religions, many converted to Islam, Buddhism, and Christianity. These faiths gradually replaced or absorbed Tengrism. Converting to Islam was never uniform for Turkic and Mongolic peoples. Older scholarship claims Sufi mystics won over nomads because their practices resembled shamanism. Modern historians challenge this. The similarities were exaggerated and the Sufi role was overstated. Evidence suggests this narrative was crafted by Sufi writers in the 15th century. The real engine of conversion was Islamic jurists, scholars, and administrators across West Asia. The path remained uneven. The Ilkhanate elite wavered between favoring and opposing Islam. Arghun Khan halted conversions, fearing religious change could destabilize political foundations. Despite tensions, the long-term pattern is clear. Turkic and Mongol dynasties gradually embraced Islam as primary faith. Buddhism spread differently across Mongolia. Unlike Islam, Buddhism could accommodate local deities and rituals, absorbing rather than erasing beliefs. By the 16th century, the Mongol heartland embraced Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism. Altan Khan invited the third Dalai Lama to his court, forging alliance that reshaped Mongolian identity. Tibetan monks built monasteries, offered medical knowledge, and assumed roles previously held by shamans. Steppe deities were reimagined as Buddhist protectors. But this was not peaceful everywhere. Some rulers launched campaigns against shamans, destroying sacred sites. By the 18th century, Buddhism dominated Mongolia, with Tengrism surviving only in fragments. As societies embraced new religions, Tengrism faded, but never completely disappeared. In remote Siberia, groups including the Saka continued practicing forms of the old religion into the 19th century. Russian explorers labeled their beliefs shamanic, but at their core lay ancient Tengrist traditions. Both the Russian Empire and Soviet Union attempted eradication. Missionaries pushed Christianity while Soviet authorities imposed militant atheism. Sacred ceremonies were banned. Yet Tengrism survived in reduced forms among northern tribes. In Mongolia, Buryatia, and Tuva, embers flickered through the 20th century, hidden beneath Buddhism or suppressed by communist rule. Only after the Soviet collapse in the 1990s did people openly rediscover ancestral traditions. In Turkey, revival took nationalistic form. Early 20th century thinkers revived myths like the she-wolf Asena not as religion but as cultural symbols for national identity. The wolf remains iconic in Turkish imagery today. In Central Asia, Tengrism has seen modest revival as cultural reawakening, expressing identity separate from Russian influence. Tengrism echoes in modern global culture. Bands like the Hu from Mongolia and Altan from Siberia incorporate Tengrist themes and throat singing into music, bringing ancient spirituality to international stages. Though no longer a major world religion, its spirit lives in the cultures, stories, and identity of Turkic and Mongolic peoples. Months had passed since Sultanate stood before the Orkhon stones. Now she rode across Kazakh steppes toward the Caspian Sea where her people would build their home. Word reached her that Engin Sheh's tribe had found safe passage and Bilge had arrived at the Black Sea. The evening air was cool, grasslands glowing gold beneath the dying sun. At her side rode Guliz, Semfira, and Dostan, trusted companions through every hardship. Together they raised a totem to ancestral spirits. As night settled and the full moon rose, their voices lifted into wind, chanting prayers for prosperity, protection, and blessing upon their new home. For ancient Turkic peoples, this was the soul of Tengrism. A faith born from wide-open steppe, shaped by whispering winds, anchored in eternal blue sky. A worldview where nature, spirit, and ancestry flowed together, where meaning was found not in temples or scriptures but in the living world. Tengrism is woven into the deepest roots of Turkic history. It runs as deep as grasslands, as old as mountains, and as boundless as the sky where Tengri resides. Thank you for joining this journey into one of the world's most fascinating overlooked religions. More explorations of forgotten and ancient faiths are coming soon, so subscribe and click the bell to stay updated.